So, Leomaris, you are no stranger to anybody in the .NET MAUI ecosystem, but go ahead and introduce yourself one more time, please.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I do see it. I can bring it up if you're ready.
Okay.
There,
Yes.
yeah.
So today I will be speaking about a topic that I really love about UI in .NET MAUI. In this case, I will make my brief presentation. Leomaris Reyes, mobile developer in Platzi, and Microsoft MVP exactly in Xamarin and in .NET MAUI for 5 years in a row. And today, I will be dividing my presentation in two motional ways. The first one is that I will be giving different tips about how do you can build a beautiful UI in .NET MAUI, but also how you can build a UI with a good performance. That is something that we used to forget and we used to forget. So it's important that you pay attention to the different tips. And finally, I will be binding a simple but too beautiful UI in real time. So please take all the questions that you have and at the finals, I will be answering.
So two quick things before you start, Leomaris. One is, as compared to everybody else, these are all my friends that I've gotten together, and it's been really hard to have just half an hour for each one. You don't have that limit because you're the last one, so we can go a little bit longer with you if your time permits or if you need. And also, how do you say your last name?
Reyes.
Oh, see, I was butchering that. I was saying it wrong. And for the longest time, I got correct. Like Gerald, I used to say Versluis, but apparently it's just Verslu and just toned down from there. So I'm learning. We should always ask.
I have the same case with Gerald.
All right. So you are amazing in terms of how much content you produce. You are an inspiration when it comes to, UI. Like my UI looks so bad, and then I see your UI. So teach us things. Like how can we all get better at this?
Thank you so much. Yes, and that's why I'm here. And I just want to pass you my little scenes from .NET MAUI. Yeah. And let's start. The first tip that I have is just use the right layout. Please, before you're starting creating a UI in .NET MAUI, you have to analyze what is the most, the better layout that you have to select for your UI. In this case, I have two examples. The first is the scenario in which I have 3 stack layout or vertical stack layout or horizontal stack layout. But my result, my final result must be just 3 different buttons. And okay, I can use 3 different layouts to do it. It's good. The result will be exactly that I want. But what happens if I can just grab it all of it in just one layout? In this case, is a grid. As you can see, the second scenario is exactly the same. So you can get exactly the same result, but using less a line of code and just your performance will be better, and also using just one layout. That's why I really love the grid. And in this case, you just have to define all the rows that you need, that in this case are 3, as we can see in the first example. And I just have to add all the buttons, all the visual controls that I need inside this layout. So the resume of that is that please, before you start creating a UI, analyze all the layout that you have to use, analyze the performance, and of course, the final result that you want. Another tip, I don't know, Sam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that is such a good tip. Like, pause before you start building, because like we're developers, like we get to a view and we just like start building it. Pause to see how much of the layouts you're using. So you're saying less is better performance.
Exactly. I used to put the following example. Let's imagine that you live in your apartment in the floor number 5. And you just were in the supermarket with a lot of bag, and you have 2 options to arrive to your apartment. The first one is just take the stairway and go step by step with the stairway and with all your bags from the supermarket. On the second one is just to take the elevator. Of course, to take the elevator will be better. And with both options, I have exactly the same result, but my performance, in this case of my body, will be too different. So, and that's how I think how to choose this layout.
Yep, good point.
Yes, let's continue with the second tip. In this case, we previously saw a great example, but what about if I told you that we have a simplified structure? This is the simplified structure about degrees. As you can see, I just have to add one row for the row definition and the column definition, and I just have to add all the definition, in this case, the value for the head, all the width for my different UI elements. So don't forget, I recommend to add this simplified structure from the create. Other topic. How can I improve what I know? In this case, I have the first scenario with the stack layout. And in Xamarin Form, we use to add the orientation. If I want to organize all my elements vertical or horizontal, that's good. And into the MAUI, you can continue to do it. But what about if I tell you that you can use a stack layout directly with this orientation without having to add all the orientation, the property orientation? And beside that, this is, of course, quicker and better. This gives me a better performance for my UI. So if you have to organize your UI in a vertical way, you have to use the vertical stack layout, or if you want to use in an horizontal way, use please the horizontal stack layout. It's exactly the same structure. So if you know how to use the stack layout, you know how to use both of them.
Yeah, this is such a good point because, like you said, it's exactly the same thing, but performance is better in .NET MAUI.
Much better, and you have you save one property just to add. Other point, please create your color palette in the application resource. I have an example that I used to see in different applications. Imagine that I have a stack layout or the layout that you want, and I have 3 buttons. In this case, the example from a color property is a background color. And I have exactly the same color, but repeated the 3 times. But let's imagine that I have 20 buttons. I have to repeat the 20 times that I add these buttons. But what about if I told you that I have a better way to do it is that just creating this a resource. You just have to create this application resource inside the color tags, give it a key that is practically a human readable name that you can remember about how to name it. And inside these color tags, just please add the hexadecimal color. How you can use it? Well, you just have to add your UI control and the color property that you need, and inside inside the parentheses, add the stack resource and the name or the key that you recently added to the colors. So that means that if I have 20 buttons, I don't have to change 20 times my hexadecimal color. Just have to change once. Another point that I have is that life is better, definitely better using styles. I have the first example, I have a button with different properties, background color, padding, text color, and font attributes. But let's imagine that I have 3 buttons with exactly the same property. It's the same example that previously, but in this case, using styles. If you have different properties for exactly the same visual elements, you can just wrap it up and create an style. The examples create the styles that the name is main buttons. And you just have to add all the properties that you need, as you can see in the structure, and add the target type that in this case is a button, but you can create for a label, for a friend, whatever you need. And to apply it, you just have to add the style property and name the style as you put in the key. So don't forget it. It allows you to save a lot of time and a more readable code, of course.
Yeah, and even like the last example that you had where you were first, setting up the background colors, like you can cut that short even more with just a style. So every button is just the same style.
You can do a mixing about the styles in a color palette, and it's better.
Yeah. So chat room is saying we're saving the screenshot. That is so on point. Like, just look at how much code you're saving by utilizing some of the built-in things here.
It's good, Another tip, please use the format text. In this case, we used to see in the same line, I labeled with different styles, with different font size, different text color. And the first examples, you can see a layout with an orientation, horizontal or directly horizontal stack layout. And I have to add 3 labels per each different style, let's call it, as I need. And that's good. That allow me to take the result that I want, but you can use the format text. This allows you to just add one label, and inside this label, you can add different styles from the different words that you have. You just have to add the label, inside label, format text tags, format text string, and just start adding all the text that you need. And allow you to save a lot of space and performance.
So to understand, if you go back for a second, like the formatted text essentially repeats the same level 3 times because you said 3 different texts, right? And just
exactly.
Okay. What's the benefit of this? Is it like performance, or is it just easier to manage?
The main benefit for me is that it allows me the code be more readable, because I'm just grabbing it up all in a same label. And of course, the performance, because if you have to add a layout and different elements, in this case, 1 label, 2 labels, 3 labels, of course, will be higher coding for me.
And Leomaris, before you move on, because I am feeling like the exact same thing that chat room is saying. Like, I feel like taking screenshots for each of these tips. Are you open to sharing some of this content, like the deck itself? Okay. So Scott, how about we do this after this is over? We're going to have Leomaris maybe put the slide deck somewhere where we can access, and then link to us, and then we'll put that out so you can follow maybe on Twitter if you are. Then we can put that link out.
But yes, don't worry. So let's continue. Another 2 important point, and the people used to confuse, is the margin property in the pattern property. There is a problem with this property because in some scenarios, could be the same behavior, but not the same. Just remember, when you are using the margin, you just have to think about your control in the space that you have outside. But the padding is exactly the contrary. Your control, but you have to calculate the space that you have inside your button, as you can see in the image. The second, the button is expanding to the top, and the first one is just leaving a space for your device. It's important that you keep in mind, don't confuse. I know that is too confused, but please
it gets confusing. Yes.
Keep in mind these different scenarios, and I think that will be too helpful for you.
Like I said, like it depends on which one is outside versus which one is inside. Like margin has to do with the container versus padding is what's on the inside. Yeah,
exactly. If you have the padding, this container in which you are adding the property is that will be received inside the space.
Okay, so hold on for a second. A couple of questions here. Scott's bringing up a good point here, like the whole top left, bottom right. How do you remember this?
Oh, I don't know how I remember.
Yeah,
I sometimes forget, but I used to have an exercise with my hands. But when I forget, I think, okay, this is the left. Sorry, I confused the left and the right in English. But this is the left, the first one. The second is the top. The second is the right. And the last one is the bottom. Just see, and you first have a side and just a top. And the contrary for the remaining points.
Yeah. Full Schnabel is asking black insert. Oh, that is the, like, are you talking about the little cutout? Like, that's our beloved iOS notch. Is that what you're talking about? Because that's always there. Well, I mean, if you're doing iOS, you know, for modern iOS devices, then you have the island, but that's the iOS thing. And I think, I mean, Android has a similar thing as well on some phones. Yeah. All right, go ahead, please.
Let's continue. I love the question. So other point, please, when you build your UI, it's too important that you test your UI in different platforms, orientation, and devices. Because .NET MAUI is multi-platform, but in sometimes you just have to apply little adjustment for, I don't know, for Android, but in iOS is good. So don't forget to test in different platforms, orientation, and devices. This can allow you to avoid a headache in the future.
Yeah. Oh, and chat room is still asking, well, full shamble, the notch is the one that holds all the sensors, like the camera and the microphone and a few other things. And it's considered like a safe space. So iOS used to have that setting where if you didn't set it, it'll still bump your content down. And if you did, it can be like a nice unified layout. But the notch is there for all of your sensors. Testing is difficult. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The iOS simulators are not bad, and you can move around different orientations. But Android, oh boy, it's even harder because there are so many differences in screen layouts and sizes. Yeah, this is a good point. I feel like this whole deck is, Leomaris, this is like me looking back at all the things that I've done wrong. It is so important, yes, to test on physical devices, like especially so when you're building a new app, like it's difficult to test on 5 different devices. Like test on one, like choose a platform where you will do most of your testing and debugging as you're building it. But once your app is done, take the time to deploy to other devices and make sure that everything is good as you expect.
Yes, it's too important to do it. And let's continue with another tip. In this case, let's use the bindable layout. The first examples I have on a stack layout, or imagine your favorite layout, and imagine that you have to repeat exactly this layout with all this property. You can repeat it, it's good, but your code will be ever more time higher and higher. If you can save a different line of code, you just have to use the bindable layout. This is the behavior of the bindable layout is too similar to the collection view, but in this case, the collection view is for a list, different information, and in this case, the bindable layout is just for a layout. So if you need 3 layout with exactly this same property, you just have to use the bindable layout. It will allow you to save time without affecting the result. So use it, use it, use it. Let's continue. All an important point for the migration to Xamarin Form from .NET MAUI, the relative layout. Please avoid to use this layout in .NET MAUI. It's not available, it's not recommendable. Alternatively, you can use the grid. I love the grid because you can just replicate exactly the same result, the same behavior than the relative layout. So keep in mind that when you think about the relative layout, but there is a point that you have to keep in mind. If you extremely must use a relative layout in an application, you can do it. I don't know if you have a legacy application from Xamarin Forms and migration from .NET MAUI. If you extremely have to use it, you can do it as you can see here in this structure. You just have to add a namespace. In this case, the alias is compat. And from this namespace, you can add the relative layout and all the code that you need. But please sync it well and don't use it if you don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see, like, you're bringing in a compat just to use a layout. It's probably not worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you got Lance here with you on all things grid. I'm in the boat where I do too, but for simple things, I still go to a stack.
It could be an ocean.
Yeah.
Sometimes I mix, but I used to use the grid really.
So is Scott's a stack layout. Yeah, there is a lot of things you said together, but I'm going to ask you one more thing. FlashAware is talking about benchmarks, and this can be tricky, but like for you, there are some best practices and recommended things that you're saying. How do you know that your UI is performing well? Do you have any performance things that you do before and after?
I personally try to apply this topic and another, but sometimes I just I like to read. I love to read from the official documentation about Microsoft. For example, this about the relative layout I knew just reading a documentation, but you know that sometimes I don't know, it could be differences that I don't take in mind, and I have to improve.
Yeah, yeah. And then especially if you're coming from a Xamarin background, like we might be just, it might be our natural habit to just start coding the way we have, but just take a look at the docs and see what's the recommended UI. Just take a minute to pause, like Leomaris said, before you start building up your visual tree. Do you have the right layout? Do you have the right type of UI before you start building? So, yeah.
Yes, and the nice from Xamarin is that the XAML in this case is exactly the same. There are different improvements, but it's the same.
Right, yeah.
And now we finish from the tips, and the final surprise is that we will be building this UI. It's a simple UI, but I really love, and we will be building in .NET MAUI. Here I have my Visual Studio just ready to start.
Okay, well, it's not simple.
It's simple.
It might be simple to you, but it's not to me, because if you just go back for a second to what you're trying to build, like I already see curved corners and I already see a negative margin to push that Maria White text into that image. The bottom maybe not too bad, but no, this is not simple to me.
You will see that it's simple. We will be building in few minutes. So let's start. What is the first that I'm keeping in mind or take into account when I start building a UI? Of course, the main layout that I have to choose. In this case, I will be just using a grid, and I will be defining all the roads, the colors that I need. The first layout that I need is in which will be containing the main image and the frame or the border with rounded corner. And that means that in the beginning of a layout, of a main layout, I need two rows. The first rows will be defining as an auto, just to take exactly head from this image. And the last one will be defining as a proportional value. How to do it? Let's start. One point previously.
Yeah.
I have been adding the image that I will be using. Sure. What you have to make sure when you are trading with image in .NET MAUI, make right click, go to build action, and please make sure that you have a MAUI image as established value.
Please do that.
Because if you don't have it, it will not work.
Yep. And there were some issues in the past where so behind every image there's a little bit of magic going on with the image resizetizer. So they're trying to make sure it works across all platforms. There were some Visual Studio issues with lots of images being dropped into PNG versus SVG. I think all of that is now pretty much sorted out. So you're good. Just make sure they're MAUI images.
Yes, it's better in the MAUI because in Xamarin you had a lot of image.
Yeah.
So I will be starting with my grid, defining the two rows, as I told you, auto as a value and proportional. That's my main structure. The first that I need is to add the image inside the image tag. Please don't forget to locate the row inside a grid, that in this case is number 0. Don't forget that the number 0 is the first row. And the source. And in this case, the name is woman, and I will establish a higher with this value and an aspect field. I close it. I have my first image or my first visual element in my screen. What's next? I have to add the white box that I have here with rounded color. I have two possible options to do it. You can use a border, you can use a frame. In this case, I will be using a frame, but you can use both of them.
And while you're typing, Leomaris, just a quick pointer for anybody watching. So what Leomaris is doing here is she's on a Mac, and this is VS for Mac, I'm guessing. and then she has the iOS simulator, and hot reload is enabled by default unless you turn it off. And so the XAML part of it just catches up as you type.
Yes, thank you. And continue with the second row, that is the number 1. Close my frame. And in this case, I will be adding a vertical option. In this case, it's fill. Pay attention here. In Visual Studio, we can continue seeing the fill and expand, center and expand, end and expand, but please don't use it because Microsoft recommends that in .NET MAUI, you just have to add the center, fill, start, all the end orientation. Okay, and the magic is just in the corner radius. In this case, I will establish it as 20, and we add a border color, transparent because I don't want it, and finally a margin. And the top of the margin will be negative. This negative allows me to create the overlapping effect. If I will to change for a moment that, and you can see that the overlapping disappears. So we have our main structure just created. What's next? Inside these white frames, I need different information from my via, or as you want to call it. You have a name, an email, the following followers, titles, its result, and a book here. And what's the result about this role? 5 rows. And these are the quantity of rows that I will be defining in the grids. And 3 columns because I have 1 column for the following, other for the followers, and the last one for the follow. And that's why here I will be also adding another layout, another grid layout, just to organize my elements inside a frame.
And so quick question here, Leomaris. I get the grid that you're adding here, but for the everything under in the white, like why did you suddenly, or not suddenly, but why did you naturally go to a frame? Because this is where I would be inclined to use a stack.
Yes, you can use I use a frame because the corner radius allow me to get this result. But another option that I used to take is the border because the stack layout didn't take me the border corners.
Right. Yeah. I suppose I'm a little spoiled because like I use some of our UI and I can throw the border onto anything, so I can round up the stack layouts as well.
Okay, at least give me the tips. Okay, so let's continue with the row definition. R5. 1, 2, I'm missing 1. Okay, and 3 columns. In this case, the column will be defined as a proportional because I want exactly the same space from these 3 columns. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and inside this grid, I can start adding all the labels and the visual elements that I need. The first is I need a label with a name, but before, let's add the row. It's the number 0. And the column, I want to locate it in the first column, but I want that this label expands to all the remaining columns. And that's why I will be adding the column expands with 3. Why 3? Because I have 3 columns. And finally, the text, Mary White. And let me add a font size. Okay, with that. Keep in mind that because time things, I'm not adding all the tips that I did, but it's important that you keep in mind when you are creating a UI, just please apply it. Okay, I will reload this because sometimes you have to reload just to see the change. And let's continue with the email. The email have the same characteristic, also almost the same, but in the second row, and also in the first column, and also I want a column span from 3. The text will be Mary Wait. I'll click that column. And that has a different color, and I will be adding a silver one. Okay. What's next? The title from the following follower and file. I will be adding another label in the first row. And in this case, I just need one column. And the text is following. And I want to add an horizontal text alignment as a center. And I will repeat this line times. That's why it's important that you can use the styles because they have exactly the same characteristics. And I will change this status and follow. Here I'm missing something because, okay, I will reload first, but I now want to add a space between the email and the titles that I previously added.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a warm reload. It's not always hot.
No, it's not always. Here is a mistake, but the mistake is that I didn't change the columns. That's why they are just in the same one. And okay, 2.6. First, I need to add a padding that and space inside this frame with 20. Okay, and I also want to add a row spacing from them. Okay, and finally, to continue with the other steps, I will be adding a margin here for the just making a space in the button. And okay, we are almost done with our UI. Let's continue with the reason from these titles. In this case, in the row number 3. Column 0, the text, I will be adding a random number. And the same horizontal text alignment. And I'm missing the text color. No, it's silver.
As if, this was not hard enough for me. Lance is pointing at how we can tap into more animations like Lottie or the latte locator to generate a parallax effect on the scroll change, and it's provided a nice little example for that. So Lance, I mean, this is hard for me. Don't make it extra hard. I need to learn how to do this better.
It's easy. Let's continue with the result. This is another label in the same line. In the next column, I will be also a random number. It's exactly the same. And center. Finally, last one, but I need to change the final column. And I also forget the text color. And I always confuse the Sienna. Okay, and we're just missing the button. The button says book here.
But it stretches across 3 columns.
Let's add exactly in the row number 4.
I can take out the little overlay so we can see the right bottom of our screen better. There we go.
Okay. And I also want to expand to all the remaining ones. The text will be book here. This text needs a text color. It's white. And finally, as background color, I will be adding a Dodger blue. And the corner radius, of course, just to create the rounder corners is black. Finally, I will add a margin. And we have finished with this UI. In a few minutes, it's simple, but I think that you can get different explanation, important scenes, just to take of that, just to learn about how to create UIs in the MAUI.
Okay, this is amazing. This might be simple for you, but this is quite amazing that you can do that so quickly. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Yeah, it's Instagram ready under 10 minutes.
Oh, in 10 minutes. I didn't put a
Um,
chronometer, but okay, I believe in you, Lance.
Okay, so I have a couple of things to ask. Let's see, I'll bring back the overlay. But first thing to point out is if you folks, yeah, code instructions, ship it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have UI like this that you can create, why not ship it? So if you are inspired, and I'm always jealous for folks like Leomaris who can do this so nicely, there is a lot of inspiration. So I'm bringing this up again. I mentioned Matt Goldman before. So every July, he runs this thing called MAUI UI July, which is something that we had started from the Xamarin days, and it's just continued on to MAUI. And it's essentially a month-long series of posts of people doing amazing things with UI. And if you wanted to see more of this type of a thing where you take a piece of UI from an amazing app and you just want to recreate that UI in MAUI, there's Leomaris, and there's a whole lot of folks who have done exactly this. So much of inspiration just to kind of look at the amazing pieces of UI that you can create.
Thank you. I really love to do it. Sometimes when I have free times, I just want to replicate a UI or make something similar.
Yeah. And let me kind of selfishly ask a question that was something that Fool Schnabel was talking about. Hold on. I'm talking about the notch here. This one, the strange insert. So you see that island up there because that's iOS whatever, iOS 16 or 17. So that purple color that you see, that's because of MAUI. That's not a part of the visual area that you were drawing. But if you wanted to change that, do you remember what it was? Like you can change it at a base level, so it's true for every page or every view of your app. I forget what it's called.
I'm sorry? Could you repeat?
So the purple that you see around the
yes.
safe area. Yeah.
The bar.
Yeah, what was that called? I completely forget now.
So how you can just delete it?
I mean, if you just wanted to have your custom color, or could you delete that entirely? Because I mean, then you're in the unsafe space.
Yes, this is there are different problems or things with this bar. Sometimes I choose to delete it. But it's important that you know that it's a safe space. But there are different designs that sometimes need to take the safe space. But be aware of that because in Android could be different your UI. So it's important the decision that you take from that.
Yeah. I mean, you should not be messing with it, but I mean, if you're very design oriented, maybe you want to do your own custom color or have the image of the woman image here stretch all the way across. Maybe it looks nicer, and then you're gonna have to do like if else checks, like if iOS, do this, if Android, don't do that. So there are ways to customize the top half or top two thirds.
I will be leaving an article from that just to going deeper to how to customize this bar.
I think you have written about it. Gerald had a video about it. So there is plenty of documentation on it. I just forget what it's called sometimes. It looks like Lance set use safe area. I will take that back. But you're in a slightly risky territory. It looks nicer, but you probably should not unless you have a very good reason.
Just be careful.
Yeah. All right, this is amazing. Like just a set of tips and recommendations that you had would have been enough, and now you have just completely made me very, feel bad about how bad I am with UI because you built this over 10 minutes. So that is amazing.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you to all the people that are reading. And if you need something, you can just write me. If I can just wrote an article and I can help you. If not, you can write me on Twitter or whatever you need.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to take your desktop down here, Leomaris, and just talk about how much you and me get to close out the show here, Leomaris. So let's just talk about what we did. We started about 4 hours back now, I haven't moved.
A
My
lot
watch
of
is like,
time.
yeah, my watch is like, aren't you going to get up now? It's like, no. But this has been amazing. So we started with, Maddie and Gerald talking to us about the state of .NET MAUI, and I think the unanimous agreement is we're in a very good state. It's a mature platform now. In a short 2 years, we've come such a long way. Tooling is stable. The ecosystem is really strong. We have, a lot of open source libraries that, developers can feel comfortable and be more productive. There's a lot of help with UI. Of course, like folks like Lance and me are biased because we make Telerik UI, but there's UI from other people as well. So use whatever makes sense for you. Don't reinvent the wheel if you cannot, because some of it requires a lot of engineering. And we talked about some of the inspirational things towards the end with Sean and Leomaris, like look at what you can create with .NET MAUI. So we have all the tools at our disposal to go do amazing things. So what's stopping us?
Let's start creating application in .NET MAUI.
Yeah, unless you're like foolish Neville and you're a wheel reinventor, then you keep doing that.
Don't be afraid and just let's start. As you can see, the UI that sometimes could be difficult, it's not difficult.
Yeah. Nobody will stop me. Absolutely. But we all need to stretch here. But thank you so much. Everybody in the chat room, Scott, Full Schnabel, Lance, and Sean, everybody has been so awesome. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to go and do some of the donations that I could not because I've been speaking with folks all through, but I'll bring that up one more time here. I see Sean's still there. So if you can, we're going to keep this open throughout the day today, or maybe if I can spell. No, that is relief. Hold on, I will go back to the Nightbot link, which I had. That one here. So we'll keep this open for now. If you can spare, help us raise some funds for Red Cross to help out Maui. But otherwise, this has been such a good time for me. I learned a whole bunch, and I feel inspired to go do nice things with .NET MAUI. Thank you for all the inspirations. Thank you to you, Leomaris, for taking the time out to do this. I know you had a meeting all the way until like 3 p.m. Eastern time for you, and then you switched to this, and you've been here for an hour now. So thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a pleasure for me.
So that's it from us, folks. Let's build amazing things and have fun. Take care, be productive, and we'll see you around on the stream. So with that, thank you. That's it from us.
Bye.